But there is a big concern that he's facing, and that's in your country, in Ukraine, and also in Europe. So we know that Babis, Prime Minister of Czech Republic, is back as being Prime Minister. He's very critical of US aid to Ukraine. We've got obviously Prime Minister Orban, so who I've met personally. Babis I haven't interviewed yet. Orban, and we've got Prime Minister President Vucic of Serbia, who I've also interviewed, who's also very critical of the amount of aid. He's supportive of Ukraine, but just critical of the amount of aid that's going towards Ukraine. And we've got the Prime Minister of Slovakia as well. And I had the same conversation with him. And that shows a shift, if we've seen with France and Germany, with AfD in the UK, there is a massive drop, a massive breakdown of support by the European public, not policymakers, of that, and what they consider an endless war and endless support to Ukraine. And I'm sure it's heartbreaking for all Ukrainians to see that. And then if you look at Ukrainian support for the war, early on in 2022, it was at over 70% of Ukrainians thought Ukraine should continue fighting until it wins the war. And 2025 is down to 24%. And Ukrainians who think President Zelensky should negotiate an end to the war was 20-something percent 2022. Now it's above 70%. Not surprising, obviously, because Ukrainian people are suffering. I was in Kiev not long ago, and Ukrainians are suffering the most out of this war, more than the US, more than Russia, more than anyone else. But also the European economy is going through some tough times. Does that worry you, and what does that mean for Ukraine's biggest ally, which is the EU?
Thank you so much. You dropped a phrase that the war started because of the intention of NATO to expand. All right, so this is a totally Russian narrative. In fact, the war led to a NATO expansion. Sweden and Finland joined NATO. Right, so those countries who were neutral for decades before the full scale invasion, and it's totally a fake information, and it goes into this ordinary playbooks. It has nothing to do with the
Can I ask you, do you mind if before we move on to my actual question, can we go a bit back and forth on this? I'll tell you my position. I'd love to get your genuine thoughts.
Right.
The way I see it, and again, I was in Odessa months before the war. I was in Kharkiv before the war as well. I love Ukraine. I've barely been to Russia. I love Ukraine, and some of my closest people in my life are Ukrainian, including my ex-girlfriend. So I see Ukraine, ex-girlfriend. Sorry, it's my apology. But I do see Ukraine. Like, I feel sorry for Ukraine, and I blame not Ukraine. I blame NATO, especially American, the warmongers in the US that kept pushing NATO closer and closer to Russia. Now, I understand the argument that this isn't the reason. There's other reasons why Putin expanded. But I always tell people, if China right now has started putting military equipment and anti-air defense systems in Mexico, look at what Trump is doing in Venezuela and Panama. Imagine what he would do in Mexico or in Canada. So it's like, for any superpower, look how China's very upset by NATO expansion in the South China Sea. That's one of the biggest issues right now, and one of the main, areas that are heating up because of NATO's continuing expansion near Chinese borders. So when I look at this, I blame Putin completely. He's the one that invaded the country. So anyone that gives him credit, I think he doesn't deserve credit. He invaded Ukraine. I don't think his intentions were for a prolonged war. I think he expected things to, last only a few days, maybe weeks. But I also see the US playing a big role in getting us to where we are today, which is unfortunate for Ukraine. Now, I know you disagree, but do you think that it has some truth? Maybe not the only reason, but some truth at all?
Well, I can give you a bit different perspective. Listen,
Please.
so 2008, Putin arrives to Bucharest to the NATO summit and threatening the Chancellor of Germany and the French president in case they will make a decision to grant Ukraine the membership action plan to NATO. It never happened, right? So, and in 2020, I guess, or 21, President Biden meets President Putin in Geneva. Right. And it's not a secret that President Biden has had a very clear position saying that he does not support Ukraine's membership to NATO. And I'm sure it was discussed over this meeting. And even before the end of his term in 2024, when President Zelensky said that simply invitation to NATO could be a really serious step, to, support Ukraine, this step were not taken. So, what we're talking about, for 2 decades, there was a clear messaging from U.S. leadership and other allies that Ukraine is not joining the NATO. There were documents. There was, a nice word said about the open door policy and the real stuff, but the facts speak for themselves. So I'm just looking from this perspective that in fact Russia has continuously received signal about no intention of allies to move ahead with anything related to Ukraine's membership to NATO, while Ukraine aspirations were there. And indeed, we continue thinking that defending and securing Ukraine and Europe through Ukraine's membership to NATO is the cheapest way, because Ukraine gets the technology, the knowledge, the capable military force, and it could be easily benefited by NATO. But speaking about that, I think it's not the priority task at this particular point. We're speaking about ending the war, and it implies a number of processes which does not require engagement with the aggressor, with the Russian Federation. It's about sanctions, it's about air defense, it's about security guarantees, and this is something which is more priority right now than thinking about NATO membership. So, my background, I've been a member of the movement for 5 years, and I've been dealing with Ukraine's accession to European Union and reforms related to that. And I've been also deputy prime minister on Ukraine's membership to NATO. So you made the right
perfect position, perfect point for you to expand on, because I'd love to get your thoughts on what I said earlier about European support to Ukraine.
Yes. So that's why I'm mentioning that. So for us in Europe, it's just a family business. Elections are happening from time to time in this or that capitals, and Ukraine is definitely a top issue on the agenda, because for Eastern European countries, the war is just on a territory of bordering countries, and the Russian Shaheds and drones are reaching their territory, like Poland, like Romania, permanently, like Baltic countries, like even Nordic countries. So it's not literally possible to keep Ukraine out of the domestic context in every European capital.
And reports now potentially Germany as well facing disruptions.
Yes. We even had cases where some of the Russian elements were deeply flying into the territory of Poland, almost closer to the German border. So this is how Europe functioning. So these processes are happening, and of course, the radical political movement or populistic political movement are becoming extremely popular these years in Europe, because simply it's the most easy and catchy way of building the political capital, just doing something opposite that the other party is doing. So I've been also in charge of building the relations with Hungary when it comes to some things they are blocking at the European platform. So I think it's a process, but the good part of it is that now the discussions are real. So we're not speaking only about supporting Ukraine. We are speaking about European defense. We are speaking about ending the war. We are speaking about sanctions. We are speaking about procuring military equipment from U.S. to secure the defense of Ukraine, but also to secure Europe. So now this is a real discussion about the